Good morning, everybody, and thank you, everyone who's here today despite the weather. My job is to introduce two speakers we have. We're indeed honored to have Michael Yam with us today. Michael helped us, helped our thinking, kind of guided us, and challenged us in doing our strategy a couple of years ago. So, Michael has had a illustrious career of about 4 decades in Malaysia. He's credited with changing the landscape, the real estate development landscape in Malaysia. And we are indeed privileged to have him here today. We also have Shaun who is also a director at Impetus along with Michael.
What I've seen this time round when I ran around the city is immense progress, despite whatever uncertainties that you've gone through. I see the highways coming through from the airport and now the flyover being constructed. So what I like to say to begin with is that you're a resilient nation, and what I'm trying to do today is draw a few parallels between the two cities that we live in. So what happens in every city around the world is more and more people gravitate towards urban environments. Why? Because that's where the government invests the most money. And why? Because the traffic's so bad to begin with. But more importantly, it's where life happens. It's where we make our money, but it's also where we should be spending our money. And effectively, that's also where we spend the most time. So why do many people not actually live in the city? So if you study a lot of global cities around the world, it is a concerted effort for every city council to try and shift or migrate people back into the city. I had the privilege of working in Australia for 8 years, and whilst I was there was a concerted effort by the city councils to encourage us to develop in the city. And I remember questioning and I said, why? People like to live in the suburbs, away from the hustle and bustle. And I remember the councillor saying, well, Shaun, think about it this way. We've spent the most amount of money in the CBD. So why would we not want to reap the rewards from the people that have come about doing this? A city is vibrant, it's productive when it runs 24/7. So what happened with a lot of cities, it does the 9 to 5, and after that it's just a ghost town. But if you go to the cities of the world, you realize that population has to be drawn back in, and then the city comes back alive.
So I can see again Colombo really booming when the right ingredients are there, provided by the government to allow it to grow economically. I came here about 3 years ago. I think it's got all the ingredients of being a great country. The recent 21/4 incidents, which has really happened in many countries, be it Bali, Turkey, Paris, London, life just goes on. Unless you say, I'm not going to stay here anymore, I'm not going to invest, I'm going to migrate from this country. But if this is your country, and this is a lovely country, we always shoot ourselves in the feet and say there's the pasture is greener on the other side. And it's not. I came here about 3 years ago. I think it's got all the ingredients of being a great country. I think one of the weaknesses maybe is the politics, but even Malaysia we face the same politics. Yes, we voted in a new government and now we are complaining it's not so effective. So you need a fairly strong leader to try and change some of the legislation and regulation and actually incentivize business and the private sector to propel ahead. We showed you some of the charts, the graph. In general, any country, and we can plot many of these countries, even those that have gone through crisis. The trajectory is always up because of those basic fundamental issues that drive property. On Monkiara, we can build 60 units, right? So that means it's 5 to 6 times more efficient than if you have built on 1 acre of land. That's more sustainable because you use up less land, right? And the truth is, in a place like Colombo, where it's basically no land, the only way to solve to avoid it in the slum is really to go high rise. And I would say, if I was able to help Colombo, I would say, why 60 units? Why not even 100 units? Which Malaysia is going that way now, because it now has got the mass rapid transit. And you want to maximize the approvals for units above station so that people travel less distances, use less car. That is one of the solution to the traffic problem. Think Singapore, think Hong Kong, right? And there's opportunity, and this government has got the political will. You got lots of low-rise in Colombo. Some of them are already dilapidated. Some of them maybe not well used. They should now get approval for what you call brownfield redevelopment. So that's the experience that Melbourne, Sydney, London's going through. London's planning rule is so tight. They won't even de-gazette their green lung. So everyone now has to develop in the port cities, right? In old airfields, in Battersea Park is one of them, the power station. And that's just an attempt to try and stop the prices from skyrocketing.
Just to add a little more context to that, so I think the question really is not about kind of an rural-urban migration in Sri Lanka. So in Sri Lanka, we have about just around 1 million people in Colombo, in CMC, and about another 1 million people that come in every day, the fringe of Colombo. So we're already seeing the donut you talked about, where if you look at the last 2 census periods, people are getting priced out of the city and moving to the suburbs, and it's, us, for example, we're looking at the fundamentals of what does it take to bring people back into the city, and can you engineer product for that? But I think again it's an inevitable cycle.
Yes.
What you will see, and what is challenging in Sri Lanka, is affordability. I think that's maybe partly what Steve is alluding to. Yes, costs are a challenge in Sri Lanka. Affordability is a challenge on one end. On the other end, our construction costs are high, our approval processes are cumbersome. We don't enjoy priority status for housing development. For example, first-time mortgage is very difficult to get. Of course, we've worked very hard with DFCC, and they've come forward with customized packages for us. But I think there's a lot of work needed. Interest rates probably need to come down, and to me, success in our transformation is when you look at a Sri Lankan youngster, they get their first job, they come out. The first thing they buy is a really expensive phone. The second thing they buy is a car, and somewhere down the line they'll think of housing. I think at least the phone won't switch, but the car and the phone they probably need to switch. And that's to me, I think that's when we would have gotten there. And I think we will start to see this happen when the mass transit investments that hopefully will go on will actually take place. So the LRTs, the railway modernizations, these are not kind of instant noodles projects. So they will take 5-6 years, but they will fundamentally transform the fabric of the city, as you have seen in Malaysia. And I think, of course, government needs to be smart in encouraging very high density along those corridors and so on. But to me, as a city planner, this is just an evolutionary process. It's an eventuality. You can't stop it really. It's just a question of when it happens. So it's not really a question of, again, a rural to urban migration in the case of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka statistically has one of the highest home ownership rates in the world. It's like 80-something%. The problem is the quality of that housing does not meet modern standards or modern aspirations. So you'll have lots of folks who'll have a house in Panadura or somewhere in the fringe. They commute some god-awful amount of time to get in because the best schools are still in the city. So what you're seeing is this upgrading process happening. A younger, wealthier generation looking for higher quality housing, and that's what we see driving change and driving demand. So again, it's a very clear force.
Isn't there a hodgepodge of buildings in Colombo coming up in an unplanned manner? That's what we could observe without no planning whatever. And some of them have come a cropper in the sense that they have now stopped building. halfway through. Is it relevant or is it irrelevant?
So I would push back and say it's not completely unplanned. I think there are plans. I think we have been not as good as we should have been maybe at regulating the way the city evolves. That said, we're not terrible. Well, one of the things we haven't done well enough is to really allow for transit corridors, which means we have to go to more expensive kind of elevated corridors for mass transit. So I would wait without passing judgment on that. On the fact that some buildings come and stall, that really has nothing to do with government or planning in some sense. It has everything to do with the developer. As Shaun in his slides showed, the tallest building planned for KL at some point is still just piling pile caps in the foundation. So this kind of thing happens if companies don't have deep enough pockets to get through a cycle. Any development, one of my real estate professors when I was in university would say, the path to real estate heaven is paved with bankruptcy. It takes incredible discipline and very, very deep pockets to get through a development cycle. So if a company is not funded well enough to see a project through despite volatility in the market, then you're in trouble. And that's the natural process of market maturity. So what we have in Sri Lanka is, there was a lot of small developments coming up, and it came to the point where everybody thinks they can effectively be a developer and they start jumping in. And then when you see volatility and markets go through these slow down cycles, those who are not capitalized well enough, who don't have the experience and the resources to be able to kind of ride these out, go into distress. And this happens the world over, not only in Colombo. And on the back of distress, somebody will buy these distressed assets at 50 cents on the dollar and make money. So these things naturally kind of correct themselves over time. But it's Colombo's at a stage where it's buyers need to be effectively beware, because you do need to dig deeper and understand who is developing. Are they capitalized enough? Can they actually see a project through? And it's, and the more ambitious the project, the more determination you need to have. I'll take our own example of Cinnamon Life. Cinnamon Life is the largest private sector investment ever undertaken in this country. It's almost $1 billion. Of course we went through all kinds of drama on that project, and we had a little bit of a slowdown in the beginning. We had some issues at the very early stage, there were some delays, but we're almost done. We will definitely see this through. We are raging ahead with the finishing. You can see it emerging, and we will absolutely see this through, because we went into it with a completely ring-fenced financial structure where we knew we had the capital to get through and come out on the other end. We're absolutely certain we will do that. So even if nothing sells from now for 2 years, we will still finish the project. But not every developer can do that. So I think the onus is back on customers and the market to kind of identify who is going to last and who is not. There will certainly be some casualties, no question. But that's again a market process. Some will fail, they will get bought up and redeveloped, and somebody else will make money on it, and somebody else will live there. It's a normal evolution of a city.
Yeah.
I think I've been very fortunate in my life to have, a very prudent father, and then subsequently a prudent father-in-law as well. I think the young have to kind of realize their limitations in life, where we may be energetic, youthful, vibrant, and quite ahead of ourselves at times. But some of the best advice has come from my dad. So when I had just graduated and secured a job before graduation, my father said to me, "Oh, you're going to get paid now. Why don't you go and speak to a bank and figure out how much you can borrow?" And in the back of my mind going, "Oh no, Asian parent, maybe he wants me to pay back what he's just sponsored me for my education." But in effect, what he wanted me to do was to actually go and buy my first home. And when I did the math, the first time I had that much money in my life, I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to consume like 60% of my income. Now what am I going to do? I have a girlfriend, and I want to have a bit of fun. But really looking back, that was the single piece of probably the best advice I ever got that has provided me with the financial freedom I've had since that very day. And since then, I've never looked back. And coincidentally, I've had the chance to also work with people from across the globe, and the similar constants that I hear are that long term is the only timeline you should really be looking at. The short term will always have its temptations, and I think as a young Gen Y, you have to be pretty focused because you have a very long life ahead of you, and if in effect you make a boo-boo along the way, you have time on your side. However, I think that if you make the right steps, the right sacrifices along the way, then it really does pay off in the long term. And property is one of them. I'm not saying it's the be-all and end-all that you have to invest in or to look into, but it's definitely a fundamental that our forefathers have instilled in us, that you need a roof over your head. Yeah, be balanced. Think of the long view, and it will most definitely pay off.